Okay, Lewis, we're live.
Okay,
Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
sure. My name's Louis Elbinger. I'm running for Congress from the Congressional District 1 in California. I live in Mount Shasta, California, and I'm really excited to be talking to the Green Party and to representing the Green Party from the northeast corner of the state.
Yeah, well, we're glad you're running, Lewis, and I think you're a very exciting candidate and very kind of unique to the Green Party because you have a lot of experience. Um, so um, that the first thing is that your experience starts with well, it doesn't start, but the cornerstone is 28 years in the State Department.
That's
Um,
correct.
and then you were political advisor to General Petraeus
That's
and
right.
General Mattis as well. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Well, I was an administrator. I joined the Foreign Service in 1984. I've actually got an MBA degree in computer science. I came from the computer field, and I joined the Foreign Service as an administrative officer, which means that I ran embassies and consulates around the world. But in the process of that, I was able to do other jobs, such as I was the cultural attaché in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And then I sort of morphed into advising in the department with the Department of Defense because I got an MSS degree at the Air War College. MSS means a Master's in Strategic Studies. So one thing led to another. I taught at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And as a result of that, I was asked to be the deputy political advisor in CENTCOM in Tampa, Florida. That's where General Petraeus was the commander of Central Command. While I was there, my boss retired, and I became the acting political advisor. And Petraeus left, and General Mattis came and replaced him. So through a series of events, I became very much involved in both the State Department and the Department of Defense.
Wow, that's interesting. And so General Mattis is our current Secretary of Defense. Do you have any insight to his disposition or his position on foreign affairs?
I do. For those who follow this, they would know that General Mattis has a nickname. They call him Mad Dog Mattis.
Yes.
But he had two nicknames, and this is what's not generally known. His other nickname was the Warrior Monk. And the reason is he's a single guy, and he's got a library of 7,000 books. And the man has read most of the books on warfare and statecraft. He's a real patriot in the sense that he's willing to die for his country, and he's willing to fight for his country. And we were able to find some common ground on that. I didn't agree with everything he thought and felt. He didn't consult me very much because I was pretty much involved in something called the Silk Road Project. We were talking about creating, making Afghanistan economically viable. What does that mean? We understood in Central Command there was no military solution to Afghanistan. We understood there was no political solution to the problems of Afghanistan. But we said there might be an economic solution if Afghanistan could be the hub of a trade and transport network that connected East Asia to West Europe and North Europe to South Asia. So this was a project that my office was working on when Petraeus was there. When Mattis came along, he wasn't particularly interested in that. The Chinese are very interested in what they call the One Belt, One Road project. They put about $80 billion into it. But we did get let me tell you an interesting story.
Sure.
Richard Holbrooke was the SRAP, the Special Representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan. And while he was alive, he was not interested in the Silk Road project. But in April of 2010, we brought together a lot of people from academia and from all around the government to talk about about this idea of making Afghanistan viable by making it the hub of a trade and transport network called the New Silk Road. There was no interest we were down in Tampa, Florida, doing this at CENTCOM. Up in Washington, D.C., they were not interested in this. Richard Holbrooke was not interested in this subject. He died suddenly in December of 2010, and his successor, Mark Grossman, came along. And when we told him about this project, Mark said, ever since I've taken this job, all the briefings have been unrelentingly negative. This is the first positive thing I've heard. He took it to Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State at the time, and in July of 2011, she announced the New Silk Road project. I retired in November of 2011. So when I went out, there was by having the Secretary of State endorse the project, there was some genuine interest in putting it forward. So this was the story of my experience in Central Command. General Mattis was not terribly interested in all this, from what I could see. He had his hands busy. The AOR, the area of responsibility for that area, consists of 20 countries, and Afghanistan was just one of the 20 countries. Which include Iran and Iraq and a lot of other problem areas. Okay, just a second. I've got someone at the door. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Sorry about that. We're back again.
That's okay.
General Mattis was fully aware of this, but he wasn't as aboard as General Petraeus and as Secretary Clinton was in making the Silk Road project go forward. That was my personal experience. I retired in 2011. It took me a while to find out where I wanted to live, and I settled in Mount Shasta, California. And I started something called the Silk Road Chai Shop, which was to continue the idea of the Silk Road and to promote it as a way of bringing world peace and bringing transportation communication and all sorts of cultural communication. People don't understand. The Silk, not only did trade in silk go on the Silk Road, but the ideas, culture, artistic artifacts, all sorts of languages and cultural ideas went along the Silk Road. So this was a way of knitting the world together. And I came to see that the Silk Road, the ancient Silk Road, was actually the first internet. It actually brought people together in a new and amazing way. So my idea of starting the Silk Road Chai Shop was to create a meeting place where people could come together from all over the world and learn about each other, basically. And that's what we've done. It opened on May 10th, 2013, and on May 10th, 2018, it'll have its 5-year anniversary, the Silk Road Chai Shop.
Oh, very cool. So in Afghanistan, did they abandon that idea of making it a trade route? And why are we still there? Like, what's the objective?
Oh, that's a good question. What's the objective? Because I left in 2011, I can't tell you what's going on right now.
Uh-huh.
But the idea had a small group. The idea of the Silk Road had a small group of proponents inside the U.S. government. I think Admiral Stavridis was interested in this idea, and because Secretary Clinton approved the idea, we were able to get money from the Department of Defense. Remember, within the U.S. government, the State Department is very small and very unfunded, whereas the Department of Defense is very large and very well funded. Right. So we actually, before I left, we actually had a conference to talk about the viability and the cost and what the United States could do to contribute to the Silk Road project, along with the international community. Now, it's the Chinese who've picked up the Silk Road idea. The Chinese have funded it to the tune of $80 billion. They call it One Belt, One Road. And they're pursuing this idea aggressively to tie in the various countries of East Asia, Central Asia, and West Europe. And there's a lot of interest in all of these countries about bringing back the Silk Road. And Afghanistan, people don't know this, but there's a hub, there's a circular road that connects all of Afghanistan. It's a circular route, and that could be the hub that everything goes into, so that you could send goods and services across borders. Right now, they're tied up at the borders. Why we're still in Afghanistan is a whole different question. I really don't think I can answer that, because I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah.
You know, either in the government or out of the government. There's a certain inertia there. And I can't. I don't want to speak with without really knowing what the answer is.
Gotcha. So it sounds like the Silk Road Project is a way that could bring peace and even bring legitimacy to Afghanistan and its government.
More than legitimacy, understand how this idea got started. What I didn't mention is that the budget of the Afghan government was at the time I was there in 2010, 2011, the budget was supplied by donor nations. 90% of the budget came from donor nations. That was absolutely unsustainable. You can't have a country that's being run on the scraps and the handouts and the offerings of other countries, because other countries are going through their own problems. So the question was, how do we make it economically viable? And the answer is, if you have trucks and trade routes and oil pipelines, especially the TAPA pipeline, that would take oil and gas from Central Asia and move it over to the markets in South Asia and East Asia. The resources, the oil and the coal and any other resources that need to be transported, they could charge a fee for transport, and that fee would thereby fund the government. So this was the concept.